Lyra didn't know that the man who would save her life was the most powerful Alpha King in the Western Territory. She didn't know that he had been searching for his mate for over 30 years, and she certainly didn't know that when she knelt at the Moon Temple's sacred altar to renew her vow of purity, he would be watching from the shadows, his storm-grey eyes burning with recognition. The temple bells chimed softly in the evening air as dozens of young wolves gathered for the monthly mate-blessing ceremony. Lyra smoothed her simple white dress and joined the line of unmated females, their heads bowed in reverence. At 19, she was one of the oldest still making this vow, but the temple priests had raised her to believe that patience was a virtue. Her mate would come when the moon goddess willed it. "Sacred Mother," she whispered along with the others, "I preserve myself for the one you have chosen. I will wait for my fated mate, no matter how long the journey." The words felt hollow tonight. 3 years she had been speaking them, watching friends find their mates and leave the temple behind. The priests insisted her devotion would be rewarded, but doubt crept into her heart like frost. What if her mate never came? What if she wasn't worthy of that blessed bond? Behind her, someone shifted restlessly. A low growl rumbled through the evening air, so quiet she almost missed it. The sound made her wolf stir uneasily, recognition flickering just beyond her consciousness. High Priest Matthias raised his arms toward the rising moon. "Children of the Pack, tonight we—" The massive oak doors exploded inward. Chaos erupted as rogues poured into the sacred space, their eyes wild with bloodlust. The congregation scattered like leaves in a storm, screaming and running for the side exits. Lyra found herself trapped against the altar as a scarred rogue stalked toward her, his yellowed teeth bared in a vicious grin. "This one smells pure," he snarled, reaching for her with clawed hands. "Alpha Fenris will pay handsomely for an untouched Omega." Terror froze her limbs. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. The rogue never reached her. A massive black wolf materialized between them, larger than any she had ever seen. Power radiated from his form like heat from a forge, and when he bared his teeth, the rogue stumbled backward in sudden fear. The black wolf's attack was swift and brutal. One moment the rogue stood leering at her, the next he lay unconscious against the far wall. More rogues rushed forward, but they met the same fate. The black wolf moved like liquid death, protecting not just Lyra, but the entire congregation. In less than 5 minutes, every intruder had been defeated or driven off. Silence fell over the temple. The black wolf turned to face her, and Lyra's breath caught. His eyes were storm-grey, ancient and knowing, and when they met hers, something deep in her chest pulled tight. Heat bloomed where their gazes connected, spreading through her body like warm honey. Impossible. The wolf shifted. Lyra watched in stunned fascination as the massive form condensed into that of a man. Not just any man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and those same devastating grey eyes. His clothes were expensive, tailored perfectly to his powerful frame. Everything about him spoke of authority, of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The temple priests had thrown themselves to the ground, their foreheads pressed to the marble floor. High Priest Matthias was trembling so hard his ceremonial robes shook. "Alpha King," Matthias whispered, "we are honoured by your presence." Alpha King. Lyra's knees went weak. The ruler of 5 packs, commander of thousands, protector of the entire Western Territory. She had heard stories of his power, his justice, his absolute authority. He could have any woman he desired, could command loyalty from the strongest alphas in the region, and he was staring directly at her. "Rise!" he said, his voice deep and commanding. The priests scrambled to their feet, but his eyes never left Lyra's face. "I came investigating reports of rogue activity. It seems I arrived just in time." He took a step closer, and Lyra's wolf whimpered with something that felt dangerously like longing. The golden thread she had heard about in whispered conversations, the one that connected true mates, seemed to shimmer between them. But that was impossible. She was nobody. An orphaned Omega raised by temple priests, with no family, no status, no particular beauty or accomplishment. The Omega who was making her vow, he said quietly, and Lyra realized he was speaking to Matthias while continuing to watch her. Was she harmed? No, Your Majesty. Thanks to your swift intervention, she is unharmed. Those storm-grey eyes seemed to see straight into her soul. Good. Heat crept up Lyra's neck. He had noticed her vow, had been listening to her whispered prayer. The thought made her stomach flutter in ways that had nothing to do with fear. The Alpha King approached slowly, as if she were a skittish deer who might bolt. When he stopped directly in front of her, Lyra had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The warmth radiating from his body made her want to step closer, to press herself against his strength and never move away. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Lyra," she managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Lyra of the Temple." Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction, and something else she couldn't identify. "Lyra," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. Her cheeks burned. No one had ever called her beautiful before. Pretty, perhaps, in the way temple priests spoke kindly to their charges, but beautiful, from the most powerful man in the territory. "I should go," she whispered, suddenly overwhelmed by his intensity, by the way her body responded to his nearness. "The ceremony is ruined, and I need to help clean." "Finish your vow first," he said, and his voice held a note of command that made her wolf want to submit. "You were interrupted before you could complete it." Lyra glanced around wildly. The other temple dwellers had begun cleaning up the damage, but several were still watching this exchange with obvious fascination. The Alpha King wanted her to complete her vow of purity, here, now, in front of him. She swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his scent, pine and steel, and something uniquely masculine that made her head spin. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, patient, but underlying, it was pure alpha authority. "Finish your vow, little one," he said, his grey eyes burning into hers. "I'll wait." And then he stepped back, giving her space while somehow making it clear that he wasn't going anywhere, that he would indeed wait, for her, for as long as it took. Lyra's hands shook as she turned back toward the altar. The moonlight streaming through the stained glass windows seemed brighter now, more focused. She could feel the Alpha King's presence behind her like a steady flame, warming her from within. "Sacred Mother," she began, her voice stronger now, "I preserve myself for the one you have chosen." The words felt different on her tongue, charged with new meaning. "I will wait for my fated mate, no matter how long the journey." The moment the final word left her lips, she felt rather than saw him move closer. His presence enveloped her like a warm cloak, and when she turned around, he was smiling. Not the polite smile of a king addressing a subject, but something warmer, something that reached his eyes and made her breath catch. "Well done," he murmured, and the approval in his voice sent heat spiraling through her chest. "Your faith honours the moon goddess." Before she could respond, before she could process the way her wolf was practically purring at his praise, he stepped back and inclined his head formally. "Until we meet again, Lyra of the Temple," he said. Then he shifted back into his massive black wolf form and disappeared into the night, leaving her standing there with her heart racing and her world completely transformed. She pressed a hand to her chest, where that golden warmth still pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Something had changed tonight, something fundamental and irreversible. And despite every rational thought telling her it was impossible, she couldn't shake the feeling that her long wait might finally be coming to an end. 3 days passed like a fever dream. Lyra threw herself into her temple duties with desperate focus, scrubbing floors until her knees ached and polishing silver until her reflection stared back at her with accusatory clarity. But no amount of work could erase the memory of storm-grey eyes or the way her wolf had practically purred under the Alpha King's attention. She was being ridiculous, foolish. Men like Damon Blackwood didn't court temple orphans. They chose from the daughters of powerful alphas, women with bloodlines and dowries and political connections. The fact that he had rescued her meant nothing more than that he was a good king who protected his people, even if her chest still carried that strange golden warmth every time she thought of him. Lyra. High Priest Matthias appeared in the doorway of the prayer hall, his usually serene face creased with nervous energy. "Please, child, come with me." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. "Is everything all right, Father Matthias?" "There is a visitor requesting an audience with you." Her scrub brush clattered to the floor. "A visitor? For me? No one visited temple foundlings. Ever." Matthias wrung his hands, his anxiety palpable. "Child, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. The person waiting in my study is not someone we can keep waiting, not someone we can refuse." The golden warmth in her chest pulsed, and suddenly she knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. "Alpha King Damon Blackwood requests an audience," Matthias whispered, confirming her wild suspicion. Lyra's legs went weak. The most powerful man in 5 territories wanted to speak with her, personally. The scrub brush forgotten, she wiped her damp hands on her simple brown dress and tried to smooth her tangled hair. What could he possibly want with me? Matthias shook his head. "I don't know, child, but we must not keep him waiting. Come." The walk to the High Priest's study felt like a march to execution. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she was certain everyone in the temple could hear it. When they reached the heavy wooden door, Matthias paused. "Remember," he said softly, "bow when you enter. Address him as your Majesty or Alpha King. Do not speak unless spoken to, and send her in, Matthias." The voice from within was unmistakably deep, unmistakably commanding, and unmistakably amused. "I think we can dispense with excessive formality." Matthias pushed open the door, and Lyra stepped inside. The Alpha King stood with his back to her, gazing out the tall window that overlooked the temple gardens. In daylight, without the chaos of battle surrounding him, he was even more imposing. His dark hair caught the afternoon sun, and his shoulders filled out his black coat in ways that made her mouth go dry. "Your Majesty," she managed, dropping into what she hoped was an acceptable curtsy. He turned, and those storm-grey eyes found hers immediately. The impact was like being struck by lightning. Heat raced through her veins, and that golden thread in her chest pulled so tight she could barely breathe. "Lyra." He said her name like a caress, and her wolf practically melted. "Thank you for seeing me." Of course, Your Majesty, though I'm not sure why you would want to see me." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Aren't you?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning she wasn't ready to examine. He gestured to a chair near the fireplace, and she perched on the edge of it, acutely aware that he was studying every detail of her face. "Tell me about yourself," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "How long have you lived at the temple?" "Since I was 3, Your Majesty. My parents died in a rogue attack, and the priests took me in." Something flickered in his expression. "You've known loss." It wasn't a question, and the gentle understanding in his voice made her chest tighten. "Haven't we all?" "Some more than others." He leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left her face. "I lost my parents when I was 15, a coordinated attack by 3 rogue packs working together." Lyra's heart clenched. She had heard whispers of the tragedy that had thrust him into power so young, but to hear it from him directly, to see the old pain that lingered in his eyes despite the years that had passed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That must have been terrible." It was, but it taught me something valuable about the nature of sacred vows. He leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on her. Sometimes what we think we're waiting for isn't what we actually need. I don't understand. I spent years waiting for revenge, planning it, dreaming of it, convinced that justice would heal the wound in my soul. His voice was quiet, contemplative. But when I finally tracked down the rogues responsible, when I had them at my mercy, revenge felt empty. What I had been waiting for wasn't what I needed at all. Then what did you need? Those grey eyes seemed to see straight through her. Purpose, connection, someone to protect who was worth more to me than my own life. The words hit her like a physical blow. He couldn't mean. He wasn't suggesting. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "I'm not sure what you're implying, but I should remind you that I have taken a sacred vow. I'm saving myself for—" "Your mate." His voice carried absolute certainty. "I know. I heard your vow the other night. Every word." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Then you understand why this conversation is inappropriate." "Do I?" He stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Tell me, Lyra, when you made that vow, when you spoke those words to the moon goddess, what did you feel?" "I felt—" She struggled for words, remembering the strange intensity of that night, the way the moonlight had seemed brighter, more focused, the way her wolf had stirred restlessly as she spoke. Different, like something had changed. "And when I told you to finish your vow, when I said I would wait—" He turned back to face her, his expression serious. "What did you feel then?" The golden warmth pulsed in her chest, and she pressed a hand to it instinctively. "I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say the truth." He moved closer, close enough that his scent enveloped her. Pine and steel, and something uniquely him that made her head spin. "I want you to tell me that you felt the same pull I did, the same recognition." Her voice failed her, because he was right. She had felt it. That inexplicable connection, the way her wolf had responded to his presence with something deeper than attraction. But acknowledging it felt like stepping off a cliff. "I'm not asking you to break your vow," he said gently, seeming to sense her internal struggle. "I'm asking you to consider that perhaps your vow is not about waiting for some unknown future. Perhaps it's about being ready for what's already here. You're the Alpha King," she whispered. "You could have anyone. Any woman in the territory would—" "I don't want any woman in the territory." His voice was firm, final. "I want you." The words hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. Lyra stared at him, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of elaborate jest, but his expression was utterly serious, his grey eyes burning with sincerity. "I don't understand," she said finally. "I'm nobody, an orphan with no family, no bloodline, no political value. What could you possibly want with someone like me?" "Someone like you?" He laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Lyra, you are brave enough to kneel in prayer while rogues attack. You are faithful enough to maintain sacred vows in a world that has given you little reason for faith. You are beautiful enough to stop my breath every time I look at you." He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "What I want with someone like you is everything." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was impossible. This couldn't be real. Men like him didn't say things like that to women like her. "I need time," she whispered. "Of course." His immediate acceptance surprised her. "This isn't a command, Lyra. It's a request. I'm asking permission to court you properly, to prove that what I'm offering is real." "Court me?" The concept was foreign. Temple orphans weren't courted. They were, at best, claimed by practical wolves looking for useful mates. "With your permission, I would like to visit you, to bring you small gifts, to share conversations and meals and quiet moments." His voice was gentle, patient. "I want to show you that you are worthy of being treasured." Treasured. The word made something crack open in her chest, something she had kept carefully locked away since childhood, the part of her that had always wondered if anyone would ever see her as more than charity, more than an obligation. "The priests won't approve," she said weakly. "The priests will approve of whatever I tell them to approve." There was steel in his voice now, the alpha authority that could command armies. "But this isn't about them. This is about you, about what you want." What did she want? The question terrified her because she was beginning to suspect the answer. She took a shaky breath. "If you're serious about this, if you truly mean what you're saying, then yes, you may court me." The smile that spread across his face was radiant, transforming his stern features into something devastatingly beautiful. "Thank you." He moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Lyra?" "Yes, Your Majesty?" "When we're alone like this, call me Damon." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her staring at the empty doorway with her world turned completely upside down. She sank into the chair he had vacated, his scent still clinging to the fabric. The Alpha King wanted to court her. Damon wanted to court her. And despite every logical thought telling her this was impossible, despite every rational fear screaming that she was setting herself up for heartbreak, she found herself smiling. The wait for her mate might not be over, but perhaps it was about to become a great deal more interesting. The days that followed were a whirlwind of impossible moments. Damon came to the temple every afternoon without fail, arriving precisely as the evening prayers began. He brought books, leather-bound volumes of poetry and philosophy that no temple orphan should ever have touched, let alone owned. He brought wildflowers from the mountain meadows beyond his territory, their sweet fragrance filling her small chamber with the scent of freedom. Most importantly, he brought conversation. "What do you think of this passage?" he asked on the 5th day, pointing to a line in an ancient text about the nature of destined bonds. They sat in the temple garden, evening light filtering through the apple trees in dappled patterns across the stone bench. Lyra read the words carefully, acutely aware of his presence beside her. The heart recognizes what the mind cannot accept. It sounds like something the priests would disapprove of. Why? Because they teach that sacred bonds are announced by the moon goddess herself. That mates know each other instantly through divine revelation. She traced the text with her fingertip. This suggests that sometimes we fight against what we're meant to feel. And what do you believe? The question hung between them like a challenge. Damon's grey eyes were focused entirely on her, waiting for her answer with the same intensity he might give to matters of war or justice. "I think," she said slowly, "that sometimes the heart is wiser than we want it to be." Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction perhaps, or relief. Have you ever felt that? Your heart knowing something your mind rejected? Heat crept up her neck. They were venturing into dangerous territory, the space between them charged with unspoken meaning. Perhaps, only perhaps. His voice had dropped to that low rumble that made her wolf stir restlessly. She risked a glance at his face and found him watching her with an expression so tender it stole her breath. "Damon!" His name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. What are we doing here? Talking, learning about each other, sharing thoughts and time. He shifted closer on the bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What do you think we're doing?" "I think we're playing a very dangerous game." "Dangerous how?" "Because." She set the book aside and turned to face him fully. "Because I'm starting to forget why I should be afraid of this, of you, of whatever this is between us." "Good," he said simply. "Fear has no place here." "Doesn't it?" The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "You're the Alpha King. I'm a temple foundling with no family, no status, no particular beauty or accomplishment. This entire situation is terrifying." "Lyra." His voice was gentle but firm. "Look at me." Reluctantly, she met his eyes. "Do you see disgust there? Boredom? The look of a man settling for less than he deserves?" "No," she whispered, because what she saw was infinitely more dangerous. Want, desire, something that looked terrifyingly like adoration. "Then trust what you see." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. The contact sent sparks racing up her arm, settling somewhere deep in her chest where that golden warmth lived. "Trust what you feel when I touch you." "What I feel is impossible." "Is it?" His thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles, and she had to fight not to shiver. "Or is it just something you've been told is impossible?" The distinction hit her like a revelation. How much of her fear was based on truth, and how much on assumptions, on the limitations others had placed on her life? "Tell me about your parents," Damon said quietly, seeming to sense her internal struggle. "There's not much to tell. I was too young to remember them clearly. The priests said they died protecting the temple from rogues, but—" She shrugged, trying to appear casual about a wound that still ached after 16 years. But sometimes I wonder if they ever really wanted me, if maybe the rogue attack was just a convenient excuse for them to disappear." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and shame flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." "Why not?" "Because it sounds pathetic, self-pitying." "It sounds honest." His hand tightened around hers, anchoring her. "And it explains a great deal about why you're so convinced you're not worthy of love." The words hit like a physical blow. "I never said—" "You didn't have to." His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into the touch before she could stop herself. "Every time I try to show you affection, you flinch away as if you're waiting for the moment I realize my mistake. Every compliment is met with skepticism. Every kindness is questioned." Tears pricked her eyes because he was right. She had been waiting for the other shoe to drop since the moment he first spoke her name. "What if this time is different?" he asked softly. "What if this time someone chooses to stay?" "You don't understand," her voice cracked. "I'm broken, Damon, abandoned, used to people leaving. What happens when you get bored, when you remember that you're a king and I'm nobody, when duty calls and you need a real queen, not some temple charity case?" "Lyra." There was steel in his voice now, the tone of an alpha who would not be argued with. "You are not broken, you are not nobody, and you are certainly not charity." "Then what am I?" "You are brave and faithful and beautiful. You are kind to children and gentle with wounded animals. You speak 3 languages and can debate philosophy with priests twice your age." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You are a woman any man would be honored to call his mate. Any man, maybe, but you're not any man." She pulled away from his touch, immediately missing the warmth. "I'm a man who has been searching for 30 years for someone who makes me feel the way you do." His voice was quiet but certain. "I'm a man who watched you kneel in prayer while rogues attacked and knew, without question, that I would die before I let anyone hurt you. Damon, I'm a man who has been alone in his own castle, ruling 5 packs with an iron fist, until a temple orphan looked at me with absolute trust and made me remember what it felt like to be gentle." His words washed over her like a benediction, too beautiful and impossible to fully believe. "I need you to understand something," he continued, his grey eyes burning into hers. "I have been propositioned by the daughters of every powerful alpha in the Western Territory. I have been offered political marriages, beneficial alliances, women bred specifically to be the perfect mate for a king." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And I have rejected every single one because none of them made my wolf stir the way yours does when you simply say my name." "My wolf?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "How could you possibly know?" "The same way you know mine." His hand found hers again, their fingers intertwining. "The same way you've been fighting against recognizing what this is since the moment we met." The golden thread in her chest pulled tight, and suddenly she couldn't breathe. "Damon, I know you feel it," he said softly. "The pull, the recognition, the way everything else fades away when we're together." She did feel it. God help her, she felt it with every fibre of her being, but acknowledging it meant accepting a reality that terrified her more than rogue attacks or temple disapproval. It meant accepting that she might actually be worthy of love. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." His voice was infinitely gentle. "But I'm not going anywhere, Lyra. I'm not your parents. I'm not going to disappear the moment things get difficult." "How can you be so certain?" "Because—" He stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands warm and steady on her arms. "Because waiting for you has been the most natural thing I've ever done. Because protecting you feels like breathing. Because when I look at you, I don't see a temple foundling or a political liability or any of the things you think you are." "What do you see?" "Home." The word was quiet but absolute. "I see home." The tears came then, too strong to fight. 16 years of believing herself unwanted, unworthy, destined to be left behind, and here was this impossible man, this king, telling her she was home. "Lyra." His thumbs brushed away her tears with infinite tenderness. "May I kiss you?" The question hung between them like a prayer. She knew that answering yes would change everything, would cross a line she couldn't uncross. But she also knew that she was tired of being afraid, tired of believing the worst about herself, tired of waiting for a future that might already be standing right in front of her. "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her forehead first, soft and reverent, like a blessing, then her cheeks, where her tears had fallen. Finally, with infinite care, he pressed his lips to hers. The world exploded. Heat raced through her veins like wildfire, and the golden thread in her chest blazed to life with such intensity she gasped against his mouth. This wasn't the gentle affection she had imagined a first kiss might be. This was recognition. This was coming home. This was the mate bond, fierce and undeniable and absolutely terrifying. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damon rested his forehead against hers. "Now, do you understand?" he asked softly. Lyra stared into his storm-grey eyes and felt the last of her resistance crumble. Her wolf was practically singing with joy, and the golden warmth in her chest had spread through her entire body, making her feel alive in a way she never had before. "Yes," she whispered, "I understand." But even as she said it, even as she acknowledged the truth that had been growing between them since that first night in the temple, a part of her wondered if understanding and accepting were the same thing. Because accepting this, accepting him, accepting that she might actually be worthy of the love burning in his eyes, would require a kind of courage she wasn't sure she possessed. "I need time," she said finally, "to process this, to understand what it means." "Take all the time you need," he said immediately. "I told you I would wait, and I meant it." As he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the garden with the taste of him still on her lips and her world completely transformed, Lyra pressed a hand to her chest where the mate bond hummed with new life. She was no longer waiting for her mate to appear. She was waiting for the courage to accept that he already had. 2 weeks later, the first threat arrived with the morning prayers. Lyra was kneeling in the temple sanctuary, trying to quiet her racing thoughts, when she heard the whispered conversation between 2 younger priests near the altar. "Can't understand what he sees in her," Brother Marcus was saying, his voice carefully low but not low enough. "She's nobody special, no bloodline, no dowry, no particular beauty." "Perhaps that's precisely the point," Brother Thomas replied. "A temporary fascination. Kings tire of their playthings eventually." Plaything. The word hit her like a physical blow, and she pressed her hands harder against the marble floor to keep from crying out. Was that what people thought she was? What she actually was? Still, Marcus continued, it's odd that the Alpha King would risk his reputation for someone so ordinary. Surely he could find better entertainment among the nobility. Lyra fled before she could hear more. She found herself in the temple's herb garden, tears streaming down her cheeks as Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Nobody special. Temporary fascination. Plaything. Maybe they were right. Maybe she had been foolish to believe that someone like Damon could truly want someone like her for anything more than amusement. The mate bond she thought she felt could be wishful thinking, her lonely heart manufacturing connection where none truly existed. Lyra! She spun around to find Damon standing at the garden gate, his expression immediately shifting to concern when he saw her tears. What's wrong? He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. Who hurt you? Nobody, she said quickly, then laughed bitterly at her word choice. I mean, nothing's wrong, I was just... Don't lie to me. His voice carried that alpha authority that made her wolf want to submit, but his touch remained infinitely gentle. Tell me what happened. The kindness in his voice nearly broke her resolve. Some of the priests were talking, about us, about why you... She couldn't finish, couldn't repeat the humiliating words. What did they say? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Steel entered his voice, and she could feel the leashed power in him, the barely contained fury. Tell me exactly what they said. They said I was ordinary, that you would tire of me eventually. The words tumbled out in a rush. They called me your plaything. The silence that followed was deadly. When Damon spoke again, his voice was so cold it made her shiver. Their names. Damon, no, they were just talking. They didn't mean... Their names, Lyra. She had never heard him use that tone before, had never seen his eyes turn that particular shade of winter grey. This was the Alpha King who commanded armies, who could destroy enemies with a single word. Brother Marcus and Brother Thomas, she whispered, but please don't do anything. It will only make things worse for me. Make things worse? He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his burning gaze. Lyra, do you have any idea who you are? Do you understand what you mean to me? I'm nobody, she said, repeating the words that had been carved into her heart since childhood. An orphan charity case who got lucky enough to catch a king's temporary interest. No. The word was absolute, brooking no argument. You're wrong, about everything. Am I? Then tell me, Damon. Tell me why you want me. Because I can't figure it out, and apparently neither can anyone else. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was strange, almost reverent. High Priest Matthias never told you about your parents, did he? About who they really were? They died protecting the temple, that's all I know. Protecting the temple, yes, but not just the temple. His hands moved to her shoulders, steadying her. Lyra, your parents weren't ordinary temple dwellers. They were keepers of the sacred bloodline. What does that mean? It means you carry the blood of the first Luna, the original mate of the first Alpha King. Your ancestors were the guardians of the ancient moon blessings, the keepers of the sacred rituals that bind pack bonds and strengthen mate connections. His eyes burned into hers. You aren't nobody. Lyra, you're one of the most spiritually powerful bloodlines in existence. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible. Is it? Haven't you always felt different, stronger during moon ceremonies, more in tune with the sacred bonds than other wolves? His voice grew urgent. Haven't you wondered why your touch can soothe crying children, why wounded animals seek you out, why plants bloom longer under your care? She had wondered. She had always attributed those things to coincidence, to wishful thinking, to the simple fact that she paid attention to things others ignored. But now, if that's true, she said slowly, why didn't anyone tell me? Because knowledge is dangerous, because there are wolves who would kill for access to a sacred bloodline Omega. His jaw clenched. Because the priests were protecting you the only way they knew how. By letting me believe I was worthless. by letting you believe you were ordinary, safe, hidden. He pulled her closer, his scent enveloping her like a protective shield. But you're not ordinary, Lyra. You never have been. I don't understand. If I'm supposedly so important, why do you want me? Surely someone with my bloodline should be reserved for the most powerful alpha in the territory? His smile was soft, almost sad. For someone strong enough to protect that bloodline and worthy enough to be blessed by it? The implications hit her like an avalanche. You're not courting me despite my bloodline, you're courting me because of it. No. His response was immediate and fierce. I'm courting you because when I look at you, my wolf recognizes his mate. I'm courting you because your laugh makes my chest warm and your tears make me want to tear apart anyone who caused them. I'm courting you because you are brave and kind and beautiful, and you make me want to be a better man. He cupped her face again, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. The bloodline is a gift, Lyra, but it's not why I love you. Love. The word hung between them like a thrown star, brilliant and impossible and absolutely terrifying. You can't love me, she whispered. You barely know me. I know that you hum while you work because silence makes you sad. I know that you give your dessert to the temple children even when you're still hungry. I know that you read the same book of poetry every night before sleep because the words comfort you. His voice grew soft, intimate. I know that when you're nervous, you twist a strand of hair around your finger. I know that you're afraid of thunderstorms, but pretend not to be. I know that you believe yourself unworthy of love because no one has ever shown you that you deserve it. Each observation was like a small miracle, proof that he had been watching her, learning her, treasuring the small details that made her who she was. I know, he continued, that you felt the mate bond the moment we kissed, but you're too scared to trust it. And I know that you love me too, even if you're not ready to admit it. Damon. His name came out as a broken whisper. I'm not asking you to stop being afraid, he said gently. I'm asking you to trust me anyway. Trust that this is real. Trust that you are worthy of every good thing I want to give you. Before she could respond, before she could process the magnitude of what he was offering, a commotion erupted near the temple's main entrance. Shouts, the sound of running feet, the distinctive howls of wolves in distress. Damon's entire demeanour shifted, his protective instincts slamming into place. Stay behind me! But Lyra was already moving, her newly awakened bloodline singing with awareness of danger. It's the rogues! They're back! They reached the temple courtyard to find chaos. A pack of rogues had surrounded the building, their leader standing boldly in the centre with a handful of captured temple children. Lyra's heart stopped when she recognised the man from descriptions she had heard whispered in fearful conversations. Fenris, the rogue alpha who had been terrorising the outer territories for months. Alpha King! Fenris called mockingly when he spotted Damon. How good of you to join us. I was hoping to have a conversation. Release the children, Damon said, his voice carrying absolute command. Now. Oh, I will, eventually. Fenris's cruel smile made Lyra's skin crawl. But first, I think we should discuss terms. You see, I've recently learned something very interesting about your little temple pet. Lyra's blood turned to ice. It seems, Fenris continued, his predatory gaze finding her in the crowd, that the Omega you've been playing with carries some very special blood, sacred bloodline, they say, the kind that could legitimize a rogue's claim to power if he were to acquire it properly. Touch her and die, Damon snarled, his wolf rising so close to the surface that his eyes flickered gold. Now, no need for threats. I'm prepared to be reasonable. Fenris gestured casually, and his rogues tightened their circle around the children. Give me the Omega, and I'll spare the temple. Refuse, and I'll burn this place to the ground with everyone inside. There's a third option, Damon said, his voice deadly calm. Oh? I kill you and every rogue you brought with you, save the children myself, and claim my mate properly. The words rang with alpha authority and absolute certainty. "Your choice." Fenris laughed, but there was nervousness in the sound. "Your mate? You think the moon goddess would bless a union between a sacred bloodline Omega and a king who cares more about power than purity?" "I think," Damon said, stepping protectively in front of Lyra, "that the moon goddess blesses unions based on love, not politics, and I think you're about to learn the difference." As the two alphas faced off, Lyra felt something shift deep in her chest. The golden thread that connected her to Damon blazed with new intensity, and for the first time since learning about her bloodline, she understood what it truly meant. She wasn't a political asset or a spiritual prize. She was a woman in love with her mate, and she was done hiding from that truth. "Enough," she said, stepping out from behind Damon's protective bulk. Both alphas turned to stare at her, but she only had eyes for Damon. "I've made my choice," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "I choose you. I choose this bond. I choose us." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The mate bond blazed to full life between them, sending waves of power rippling outward. Damon's eyes went wide with wonder and fierce joy, while Fenris snarled with fury. "You little fool," the rogue alpha spat. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Yes," Lyra said quietly, taking Damon's hand and feeling their combined power surge through her like lightning. "I do." The battle that followed would be talked about for generations. But in that moment, as Lyra finally embraced the truth of who she was and what she meant to the man she loved, all she could think about was how right it felt to stop running from her destiny. The air itself seemed to catch fire. The moment Lyra declared her choice, the mate bond between them exploded into blazing life. Power coursed through her veins like molten gold, and she felt Damon's strength merge with her own in a way that made her gasp. This was what she had been born for. This was what her sacred bloodline had been waiting centuries to experience. Complete union with her destined mate. "Impossible!" Fenris snarled, his eyes wide with shock as waves of combined power rippled outward from the mated pair. "She can't fully claim the bond without the proper ceremonies." "Watch me," Lyra said, her voice carrying new authority. Damon's hand squeezed hers, and she felt his fierce pride and love flowing through their connection. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Last chance, Fenris. Release the children and leave my territory. Now." "Your territory?" Fenris laughed, but the sound was strained. "You think mating with one little Omega gives you claim over sacred bloodlines? I'll take her from you, King. I'll force the bond, claim her power, and use it to challenge your rule." "You'll try." The battle erupted with devastating swiftness. Fenris shifted first, his massive grey wolf lunging toward Lyra with jaws wide. But Damon was already moving, his own shift instantaneous, his black wolf intercepting the attack with bone-crushing force. They crashed together in a tangle of fur and fangs, while around them the remaining rogues engaged the temple guards who had rushed to defend their sacred ground. Lyra stood in the centre of the chaos, power thrumming through her like a second heartbeat. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. She could feel Damon through their bond, could sense his moves before he made them, could lend him strength when he needed it most. But more than that, she could feel the sacred magic of her bloodline responding to the violence in her sanctuary. The temple itself began to glow. Ancient symbols carved into the stone foundations blazed to life with silver fire. The very air shimmered with protective energy, and the rogues closest to the temple walls began to back away in fear as the power built to overwhelming intensity. "The sacred bloodline protects its own," High Priest Matthias whispered in awe from somewhere behind her. "The temple recognizes its true guardian." Fenris must have sensed the shift in power, because he broke away from his fight with Damon and rounded on Lyra with desperate fury. "If I can't have you willing," he snarled, "I'll take you broken." He lunged, and Lyra met him head on. She didn't shift. She didn't need to. The power of every sacred bloodline Luna who had come before her flowed through her hands as she caught Fenris mid-leap and held him suspended in the air with pure force of will. "You want to know about sacred power?" she asked, her voice echoing with otherworldly authority. "Let me show you." Silver light erupted from her palms, and Fenris screamed. The light didn't harm him, but it laid bare his soul, forcing him to confront every cruel act, every innocent life taken, every moment of violence he had chosen over mercy. The weight of his own darkness crushed him, and he fell to the ground writhing in agony. "This is what sacred bloodline power truly means," Lyra said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "Not the ability to destroy, but the ability to heal. Not the power to take, but the power to protect. Not the right to claim others, but the strength to claim ourselves." Around them, the remaining rogues dropped to their knees in submission. The temple children ran to safety. The very stones beneath their feet seemed to pulse with approval. But Lyra only had eyes for Damon. He had shifted back to human form and was walking toward her with wonder written across his features. Their bond hummed between them like a living thing, stronger now than she had ever dreamed possible. "My Luna," he said softly, and the title was both acknowledgement and benediction. "My Alpha," she replied, and felt the last walls around her heart crumble completely. He reached her in 3 strides, pulling her against him with desperate relief. "Are you hurt?" "No." She smiled up at him, feeling more complete than she ever had in her life. "I'm home." "Yes," he breathed, and then his mouth was on hers. This kiss was nothing like their gentle first one in the garden. This was claiming. This was celebration. This was the fusion of 2 souls who had finally stopped fighting their destiny. Power exploded outward from their joined lips, washing over the temple grounds in waves of healing energy. Where it touched, wounded guards found their injuries mending. Where it passed, broken stones reformed themselves. Where it lingered, flowers bloomed out of season in celebration of the bond that had just been fully claimed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the entire temple courtyard was silent except for the sound of Fenris's whimpering from where he lay broken by his own darkness. "It's over," Damon said, his forehead pressed against hers. "No," Lyra corrected, her voice warm with love and certainty. "It's beginning." High Priest Matthias approached slowly, his ancient face bright with tears of joy. "Luna Lyra," he said formally, dropping to one knee, "the temple recognizes your claim and celebrates your union. Will you accept our pledge of loyalty?" Lyra looked around at the gathered temple dwellers, at the place that had been her home for 16 years, at the people who had raised her and protected her and loved her as best they knew how. "I will," she said, "but not as your ruler, as your daughter, as your friend, as someone who chooses to stay, not because she has to, but because she wants to." The cheer that went up from the crowd was deafening, but through it all, through the celebration and the joy and the overwhelming rightness of this moment, Lyra was aware only of Damon's arms around her and the mate bond singing between them like a song of coming home. "I love you," she whispered against his ear, finally brave enough to say the words that had been growing in her heart since that first night when he told her to finish her vow. "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "My mate, my Luna, my everything." As the sun set over the temple grounds, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Lyra reflected on how completely her world had changed. This morning she had been a temple orphan, afraid of her own worth. Tonight she was a Luna, a beloved mate, a woman who had claimed her power and chosen her destiny. The sacred vow she had made all those months ago had been answered in ways she never could have imagined. She had been saving herself for her mate, and he had been worth every moment of the wait. 2 months later, Lyra woke to the sound of children's laughter drifting through the open windows of her new chambers. Not the small, sparse room she had occupied as a temple foundling, but the Luna's suite in Damon's castle, where morning sunlight streamed across silk curtains and fresh flowers adorned every surface, where she belonged, where she was treasured, where she was home. "Good morning, my love," Damon murmured against her ear, his arm tightening around her waist. Even in sleep he kept her close, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. "Good morning, my king," she replied, turning in his embrace to study his face in the golden light. The weeks that followed the battle at the temple had been a whirlwind of changes. The rogue threat had been completely eliminated, Fenris and his followers either dead or pledging their loyalty to the Alpha King, who had shown them mercy when they deserved none. The temple had been rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful than before, with new protections woven into the very stones by Lyra's sacred bloodline magic, and their bond had only grown stronger. "The delegation from the Eastern Territory arrives today," Damon said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Are you ready to meet them as my Luna?" Lyra smiled, remembering the scared girl who had once believed herself too broken for love. That girl felt like a stranger now. "I'm ready for anything, as long as you're beside me." "Always," he promised, the word carrying the weight of a sacred vow. They rose together, moving through their morning routine with the easy intimacy of mates who had claimed each other completely. Damon helped her into the ceremonial lunar robes, deep blue silk embroidered with silver thread, a crown of moonstone and silver that had been crafted specifically for her, while she straightened his formal coat and smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his collar. "You're nervous," she observed, sensing his tension through their bond. Not nervous, protective. His hand settled on her shoulders, grey eyes serious. "The Eastern Territory has been resistant to acknowledging our union. Some of their alphas still believe a sacred bloodline Luna should have been reserved for political alliance rather than this. Rather than love." Lyra's voice carried gentle amusement. "How terrible for them that the moon goddess values the heart over politics." "Indeed." His smile was fierce with pride. "Though I suspect they'll change their tune once they meet you properly." The formal reception was held in the castle's great hall, packed with dignitaries from across the territories. Lyra entered on Damon's arm, her head high and her step confident. The girl who had once hidden behind temple walls was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth. The Eastern delegation was led by Alpha Marcus Thornfield, a stern man with calculating eyes who had made no secret of his displeasure with their union. "Alpha King," he said formally, his bow precisely correct and nothing more. "We congratulate you on your recent acquisition." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Lyra felt Damon's anger flare through their bond, but she squeezed his hand gently and stepped forward before he could respond. "Alpha Thornfield," she said, her voice carrying the otherworldly authority of her bloodline. "Thank you for travelling so far to meet me. I understand you have concerns about the legitimacy of my claim." His eyebrows rose slightly at her directness. "Luna, Lyra, I merely question whether the sacred bloodline should be bound to personal preference rather than territorial advantage." An understandable concern. Lyra moved closer, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift, becoming warmer, more welcoming. "Perhaps you would allow me to demonstrate why the moon goddess chose love over politics for this particular union." Before he could respond, she reached out and placed her hand on his arm. The effect was immediate. Alpha Thornfield's eyes went wide as the healing power of her bloodline flowed through him, not harming but revealing. She showed him the strength of her bond with Damon, the way their united power had defeated the rogue threat, the prosperity that had already begun to flourish under their joint rule. But more than that, she showed him the love between them, pure and fierce and absolutely unshakable. When she pulled her hand away, Thornfield staggered slightly, his stern expression replaced by something approaching awe. I see," he said quietly. Forgive my presumption, Luna. The bond between you is extraordinary." "It is," she agreed simply, "and it makes us stronger than any political alliance ever could." The rest of the delegation fell in line after that, offering their formal recognition and pledges of loyalty. By the time the ceremony concluded, even the most sceptical visitors were speaking of the Golden Luna and her perfect union with the Alpha King. But Lyra found herself thinking not of politics or power, but of quiet moments yet to come. That evening, she and Damon walked through the castle gardens as they did every night, fingers intertwined, talking softly about their day. It had become their ritual, this peaceful time together when the demands of leadership fell away and they were simply mates enjoying each other's company. "Do you ever regret it?" Damon asked suddenly, his voice thoughtful. "Leaving the temple? Accepting all of this responsibility?" Lyra considered the question seriously, thinking of the girl she had been just months ago. "No," she said finally. "I regret the years I spent believing I wasn't worthy of love. I regret the time I wasted running from what my heart knew to be true. But accepting you, claiming our bond, becoming your Luna." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her hands coming up to frame his face. "Never." "Even though it means sharing me with 5 territories? Even though it means state dinners and political machinations and constant scrutiny?" "Damon." Her voice was soft but certain. "I would choose you in a world full of obstacles. I would choose you in a world full of opportunities. I would choose you in 100 lifetimes, in 100 worlds, in any version of reality." She smiled, letting all her love shine through their bond. "You are my mate, my heart, my home. Everything else is just details." The kiss he gave her then was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. Lyra's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Damon." "I know we're already mated," he said quickly, his confidence wavering for the first time she could remember. "I know the bond is complete and recognized by every authority that matters. But I wanted, that is, I hoped." He took a deep breath and dropped to one knee in the middle of the garden path. "Lyra, will you marry me? Not as a Luna accepting an Alpha King, but as a woman choosing the man she loves?" The ring was perfect, a moonstone surrounded by diamonds, simple and elegant, and absolutely beautiful. But more beautiful still was the hope in Damon's eyes, the vulnerability of a man offering his whole heart. "Yes," she breathed, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, then rose to sweep her into his arms and spin her around until they were both laughing with pure happiness. "When?" she asked when he set her down, admiring the way the moonstone caught the starlight. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'm not going anywhere." "The autumn equinox," she said immediately, "here in the gardens, under the full moon, with our families and friends, and everyone who wants to celebrate with us." "Perfect." He kissed her again, quick and fierce. "Absolutely perfect." As they continued their walk, planning their future with the easy joy of mates who had found their forever, Lyra marvelled at the journey that had brought them here. From the scared temple orphan who had knelt before the moon goddess, asking for a mate she wasn't sure she deserved, to a confident Luna planning her wedding to the love of her life. "I was thinking," Damon said, as they paused beside the fountain where silver fish swam in moonlit water, "about what you said that first night, about saving yourself for your mate." "What about it?" "You did," he said simply. "You saved yourself, not just your body, but your heart, your capacity for love, your ability to trust. Despite every reason life gave you to close yourself off, to believe you weren't worthy of happiness, you kept yourself open to the possibility of love." His thumb traced over her new engagement ring, his voice soft with wonder. "You saved yourself for me, and I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift." "You already are," Lyra said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "You've been worthy since the moment you told me to finish my vow and that you would wait." "I'll always wait for you," he murmured against her lips. "However long you need, whatever you're facing, wherever this life takes us, I'll always wait." "You won't have to wait much longer," she replied, smiling up at the man who had become her entire world. "I'm yours, Damon Blackwood, completely and forever." "And I am yours," he replied, the words carrying the weight of a sacred vow. "My Luna, my love, my everything." As they walked back toward the castle, their future stretching bright and beautiful before them, Lyra thought about the girl who had once knelt in a temple and begged the moon goddess for a mate. That girl had asked for someone to love her despite her flaws, someone to overlook her ordinary nature and lack of status. Instead, the goddess had given her someone who saw her flaws as beautiful, who treasured her supposed ordinariness, who loved her not despite who she was but because of it, someone who had been worth waiting for, someone who would be worth loving for the rest of her very long and very happy life. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear your thoughts about sacred vows, destined love, and the courage it takes to accept that we might actually deserve the happiness we've been waiting for. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you'd like to support me and help these stories reach more hearts, please subscribe. It's free and it means the world to me. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest act of faith isn't waiting for love to find us. It's believing we're worthy when it finally does.